While I was doing my low-cost tray clears, something popped up in my mind. Sometimes it sucks trying to minimize my use of cookies like Wind Archer or Burning Spice, but I've rarely gone, damn, I wish I could use Mystic Flower. Then I started thinking about other game modes. Alliance? For bucket clears, I guess, but for speedruns, not really. She's not used there. I guess she appears sometimes, but normally it's just a one team with Space Donut, Rebel, Black Lemonade, Twiz, and Star Coral. Maybe Dark Choco for Donut if the season calls for it. For Guild Boss, she's used in the Red Velvet Dragon above level 50, sure, but before then she's outclassed by Ferret, and despite being the healer specifically made for the boss, she's already showing cracks. The other guild bosses don't favor her either, with the Avatar of Destiny soft banning any cookie with debuffs, as well as Blueberry Pie having simply better support options than Flower in the Living Abyss. But what about the Kingdom Arena? Overheal into shield conversion, periodic and burst healing, buff protection, increased damage resist for building cooldown, enemy cooldown pushback, immunity to crowd control? Surely she's not falling out of favor there, right? Well, she is optimal on scam comps, but for standard, she's gapped by Snapdragon. Snapdragon! Upon her release, Mystic Flower was easily the most dominant cookie in CRK. You literally cannot play the game without her. From Arena, obviously, but also Guild Boss and Alliance. Without Flower, you'd be missing out on over doubling your damage by being forced to run Prune instead of Zap. Alliance has also gotten damage crept to basically require you to run Mystic Flower. This is mainly due to her incredibly overloaded kit. Firstly, a 206% of attack periodic heal and lifesteal healing for your DPSs that caps up to another 200% of Mystic Flower's attack, totaling 406%. For comparison, Cream Puff's successful spell is only 304.5% of attack with a 1 second higher cooldown as well. But then, Mystic Flower also has the Cocoon of Futility, a 20% max HP shield which also converts Overheal into a HP shield, essentially increasing your team's max HP. And then she applies the Touch of Meaninglessness to allies, increasing debuff resist, damage resist, and indirect damage resist, which applies to things such as, I don't know, reflect damage, like the whole gimmick of RVD, and then applies the Pale Plague effect to enemies, reducing attack and pushing back their cooldowns. And the cooldown pushback bypasses debuff immunity and is not reduced by debuff resist. Aren't I glad that a healer got the ability to apply a crowd control effect that bypasses debuff immunity? Oh, and another thing, her beast passive is the Lantern of Apathy, which gives her damage resist for building cooldown, as well as summoning a lantern that will persist even if she dies, which periodically burst heals the team. Although it essentially disables itself if you have a safeguarded cookie on the team. And wow, that is a paragraph for a healer. By far the most overloaded healer in CRK, at least until PvE awakens. But despite all of that, she still has two major flaws. The first one, which I can't even believe is a flaw, but that's just the state of CRK in 2024, is that she's not literally invincible. By any normal standards, she has sufficient damage resist to be relatively bulky between both her personal buffs and her team-wide buffs. However, this is Cookie Run Kingdom, where we have the Half Pavilion, which houses cookies like Snapdragon and Yeti, who are literally unkillable thanks to being safeguarded, or Cream Ferret, who is basically always intangible. Despite that massive upside, their buffs and healing are still competitive with regular, non-invulnerable cookies, such as Mystic Flower herself. And furthermore, she lacks offensive prowess on her buffs. She has weakness on Pale Plague, which is pretty decent, and then a 10% attack buff on her Lantern, which doesn't even have 100% uptime. And that's literally it. On top of that, the Pale Plague weakness also only applies sometimes in PvE, since it is affected by debuff immunity, as well as Alliance bosses typically being immune to debuffs, or at least half of them. Mystic Flower's Fragility, and I am using Fragility very likely here because she literally has more self-net damage resist than Fettuccine, was mostly highlighted by Awakened Golden Keys. The TLDR of Golden Keys' skill is that she does Big Nuke, even bigger to the lowest HP enemy, and blocks buffs and healing. It just so happens that every other viable arena cookie is either intangible or has higher base HP, so she's often the cookie singled out by Golden Keys. Which is why since the advent of AGC, we've had Yeti comps and Snapdragon comps return. No, seriously. How do you get replaced by somebody you're supposed to power creep after being released 1 year after as the big new rarity? Something that's not oftenly discussed in CRK is the fact that your team is only as strong as your weakest link, at least 90% of the time. If one cookie dies, the rest of your team follows suit, which makes sense. If your team can still function without a cookie, then that cookie was probably inefficient in the comp anyway. So when your healer, the cookie tasked with keeping you alive, can get 100 0'd with no form of counterplay, you can see how Mystic Flower being the weakest link can lead to her being mostly replaced in Arena. Yes, she is still strong and essential in many comps, but she's not the standard anymore, nor is she universal like she used to be. More on the second point, even before we got modern buffer healers like Starcoral or Cream Ferret, we still had very potent buffs through Cream Puff and even Rockstar. Cream Puff, for example, has a whopping 37.5% attack buff and a 25% crit damage buff with her Magic Candy. Again, compare that to Mystic Flower's rather mediocre weakness and attack buff, and you can see how Mystic Flower was never truly infallible. Notice how I said before we got modern buffer healers. Well, this is by far the biggest reason for her fall off in PvE. Cream Ferret and Star Coral are just incredible cookies that really give Mystic Flower a run for her money. Starting with Cream Ferret, remember the thing about the weakest link? Well, Cream Ferret directly targets that with their emergency heal that can literally full heal you in Alliance. This is an insane feat considering how much healing is nerfed in Alliance. Between the 65% heal down and the 200% max HP increase, then as a percentage of HP healed, regular healing is translated into 9 times less in Alliance. So, to put this into perspective, Cream Ferret's emergency heal can full heal your frailest cookie 9 times over. Not to mention, they have an insane team-wide crit and crit damage buff, and further attack buffs for your highest attack cookie, and more healing to your highest attack cookie, which will typically be your frailest, and increased crit damage. Mystic Flower is not keeping up with any of that. Star Coral further ups the strength for Flower's competition, which he lacks with scaling, which, by the way, that scaling is legitimately horrendous. 77% of attack as healing is lower than Golden Osmanthus, for Christ's sake. He makes up with personal damage, a high hit count, and every buff under the sun, including attack speed, which allows you to go through your cast animations faster, which may potentially be slightly irrelevant in a time-based game mode where the meta revolves around bursting things as fast as possible using a skill rotation every wave. Just a theory, though. She also taps into increasing Amplify buff, which is weirdly actually really important nowadays with Black Lemonade and maintaining her Electrifying Rock Spirit buff. And her low heal scaling issue is mitigated by the fact that Star Coral has over 70% more base attack than Mystic Flower. And not to mention, all of the offensive buffs she provides also applies to herself, such as attack percent and crit percent, which further increases her healing. Star Coral's wide array of useful buffs alongside her high hit count and personal damage contributions makes her an incredibly good healer for the Zap comp, which needs literally everything Star Coral provides. And Cream Ferret, although their team-wide healing is weaker, their burst heal, their ability to patch up your weakest link, their intangibility, their insane offensive buffs can easily outscale Mystic Flower in most PvE game modes, which you can already see. Cream Ferret is used on Red Velvet Dragon before level 50, which goes to show how Mystic Flower is really only relying on her 50% indirect damage resist for Red Velvet Dragon nowadays. The next time we get an offensive healer that can let your Zap team survive through the RVD, Mystic Flower's RVD niche is completely gone. She's already starting to fall off from Alliance, and she's already starting to be a niche option for Arena. Although still strong and respectable, Mystic Flower is really starting to lose her footing with rapid damage creep. Her lack of intangibility or safeguard is allowing her to get sniped in the arena, and her inability to severely enhance her team offensively is causing her to fall off for PvE game modes where other buffer healers are sufficient in keeping you topped up while also increasing your damage by a large amount. Honestly, I've always thought that Mystic Flower's shelf life was until PV awakens and inevitably replaces Mystic Flower, but she's already falling off now. And honestly, On the one hand, it's really concerning, but on the other hand, Cream Ferret and Star Coral, the two cookies that are mainly her replacements in most game modes, and Snapdragon and Yeti too, I guess, they're very accessible by most players. So it's power creep, but in a way that benefits players. But anyway, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe because that really helps the channel a lot. See ya! Also, I have a coffee now, so if you want early access to videos or your name at the end of the videos, well, be sure to check the description and head to my coffee page. It's completely optional and you should really only spend it if you have extra income, but it does help the channel a ton.